Hi all, Mary Bolger here, Naturalist with Iowa County Conservation, and I want to welcome you to the first of several of our wild edibles series. Today we are going to be learning how to make something maybe you've never heard of before, violet jelly. Perhaps you've made different kinds of jelly with different kinds of fruit, but never made violet jelly before. Violets are one of my favorite spring flowers. You can find them just about anywhere in your yard or parks or different kinds of places. So this will be kind of the first of our wild edibles series. We'll do different things throughout the late spring and summer here of things that you can forage and then cook with or turn into food here. So this is I've done some Facebook Lives, but this is kind of my first kind of longer post, so we might have some technical difficulties. Bear with me. What I'm going to do first is just kind of go over some of the materials, things you'll need for this, and then we're going to go through the process. If you happen to be tuning in live here and you have questions, the great thing about this platform is you can ask questions and they'll pop up right here on my screen. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that and answer them as I go. So I'm gonna grab my camera here and then I'm gonna turn it around so we can kind of see some of the materials we're gonna use. So first I just wanted to take a look at, if you're unfamiliar with what violets look like, there are a couple different colors of violets, but the most common that you'll see are these beautiful dark purple violets. And this is what we're going to be using today. There are also white violets and also some lighter purple violets that you can find here. So we're going to be using these dark purple violets because that is what will give our color to the jelly today. So let's look at a few of our other materials that we're going to be needing. So if you've made jelly before, you might know that you need something called pectin. And pectin can come in liquid form or powder form. Today I'm using a brand Sure-Gel that is a powder form. There are many different kinds out there. We need 2 boxes of this today. We need some lemon juice. We need sugar. You'll need measuring spoon, a tablespoon. You'll also need a big kind of table serving spoon and a wooden spoon. And then for this particular recipe, you're going to need 3.5 cups of violet tea. I'll talk about how we make that. I have already actually made that, but I'll talk about the steps in just a minute here. You're going to need a very large saucepan. And for the canning process today, we are going to be using a hot bath method. So one of these big canning pots here. You can see right now I have my jelly jars in there. They are sterilizing right now. You can see kind of the steam running off there. In this type of jar, it has a nice little lid that you can put on there to kind of keep it hot. I'm going to take it off so we can see a little bit better. And it has a nice basket that you can also use to kind of lift some things out. We'll get back to our jars here in just a moment. I also have this handy little tool, and if you can at all, you know that this is a really great tool. It is a jar lifter. It helps you take those hot jars, if you're using this hot bath method, out of the pan safely. We're gonna need some sort of funnel. This is really helpful for when you're pouring what you're going to be making into the jars a little bit later. I use a measuring cup kind of to measure when I'm pouring in the jars. Here are the lids and the rims to my 8-ounce jelly jars that we'll be using. And then I also like to have an extra towel in case I make a mess and I need to kind of clean things up. And then a hot pad in case I need to grab something that's hot. So we're gonna go back over here and take a look at what we're going to be starting with, kind of making our mixture together to then put in our jars. So our jars right now are in the canning pot. The reason that they are in there right now is to heat the jars up a little bit. If we were to take this hot mixture, which we'll cook here in just a moment, and put it in cold jars and then put them in the hot water, we run the risk of breaking the jars. And so we don't want to do that. It also will sterilize the jars. You always want to use clean, sterile jars, because when you're canning, if you do that, you run the risk of sealing bacteria up in there, and that's not very good, okay? So back to our violet tea here. If you take a look, it's a deep, dark purple, and I made this ahead of time, and how you make this is you kind of do it just like you would steep tea. So if you've ever made your own tea before out of herbs, you take leaves or different plant materials or parts from plants, and then you put them in hot water and let them sit. So what I did for this was I took about 3 cups of violet blossoms. I put them in a glass container, and then I poured boiling water over them. Now you're going to find online there are many different great recipes for violet jelly. The one that I'm using says you can leave them in, leave the hot water in there and let it sit anywhere from an hour to 24 hours, depending on the color that you would like for your, or how deep of color you would like for your jelly. Now, the longer you leave it in there, the more color that is going to come out of the blossoms of the violets. And so it's not going to stay this color. It's actually going to change color because we're going to add different things. It will get lighter, and I'll show you the finished product here a little bit later so you can kind of see the color. But right now it is very dark, and what we're starting with. So you're going to steep your violet blossoms. And then you're going to use this along with all of our other materials here to make your jelly. So I'm going to set my camera down and kind of go through the steps, the process here of what we're going to do for that. Now, first thing, I'm going to put my 3.5 cups of the violet tea in my pan. I'm going to turn it on and start to get that heating up here. And the recipe that I have says that you add your violet tea here, and then you are going to add the lemon juice. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice right in with that violet tea. And almost immediately when you add that lemon juice, it kind of changes the color of the violet tea. I'll bring this over here so you can kind of see the change in color already. Remember how dark that was just a minute ago? And now that violet juice, the acidity in there has changed the color quite a bit, okay? All right, so we'll come back down here. So we're gonna wait for just a moment, and we are going to let that come to a boil. I have that on high right now. It won't take too terribly long for that to come to a boil. And so the next few things that we're going to add as soon as our violet tea and our lemon juice come to a boil, we are going to add, or let that boil for 1 minute, and then we're going to add our pectin, and we're going to add our sugar. We're going to dissolve that, mix that in, and we're going to let that boil for another minute. and then our mixture should be done to then add to our jars. So if you're a beginning canner and you've never made jam or jelly before, you might wonder, so what's the purpose of the pectin? The purpose of the pectin makes that that jelly-like or that thicker consistency. Now, I just recently, this recipe or this thing was something that I just kind of was introduced to not too terribly long ago. And when you make jelly from fruit, lots of different kinds of fruit have natural pectin in them. So it acts kind of like a thickener in itself. But with the violets that we're using today, there really isn't any pectin in them because you're just making a tea. So you're taking the color from the violets, that beautiful purple color, and you are then adding some different things to make the jelly. So the purpose of the pectin, of course, is to make it thicker. And then the purpose of the sugar, of course, is to make it a little bit sweeter. I'll show you an example of what our jelly color looks like. So it can vary depending on how long or what color you start with from that violet tea. But this one is kind of a medium light purple. But it is pretty transparent. You can see a little bit through it, but a beautiful, beautiful color. Nice and sweet for jelly. So, all right. Our liquid is almost ready to boil. So we'll let that bring to a boil and then we'll boil it hard for about a minute. In the meantime, I'm going to come over to our jars and we're going to take a look at them. You can see there's a little bit more of that steam coming off of them here. And you can kind of see air bubbles rising above. So those jars are heating up. They're nice and hot right now. I wouldn't want to reach in and grab them, of course. And so those jars are sterilizing right now and they're going to be ready to fill as soon as our liquid is finished. Our mixture is almost ready to boil. All right, we'll kind of put the camera down a little bit here so we can watch it a little bit. I might put my lid back on my big pot to make sure that those stay plenty hot here. Another way that you can, so we're using the hot bath method today, but you can also use a pressure can cooker. There's a few more steps that you'll need to do if you do that. And it looks like our mixture, our tea and our lemon juice is boiling. So I'm going to start the timer, boil that for 1 minute. And then it will be time to add our sugar and our pectin. So in this particular recipe, we add 3 cups of cane sugar. Now, as I was researching recipes, I did find alternatives, some with less sugar, some that had sugar substitutes. So depending on what you like and what you can eat, that you can kind of make some changes there. But this particular recipe has 3 cups of the cane sugar. So, and then 2 containers of the Sure Gel, the powdered Sure Gel. All right. It's boiling nice there. We'll take a look at it. You can see that the color, if you can see that purple a little bit, is really starting to change a little bit. Okay. So timer, it's almost been a minute. We're going to add our sugar. There we go. We're going to now add our 2 packages of powdered pectin. There's 1 and there's 2. We're going to give it a stir. Just because when you first put it in there, it might get a little bit chunky. We want to make sure that we break that up. I'm breaking that up, stirring it up. And then I'm going to add my sugar. And then I also want to give it another stir here because that can get a little bit chunky too. So I'm going to stir this here, and I'm going to keep an eye on it. I've noticed already that the consistency, that liquid, because of the pectin, has thickened up already, okay? And so, oh yeah, it's starting to get really thick. When this comes to another hard boil, with this particular recipe, we are going to then set the timer for 1 more minute, and then our jelly will be done and we'll be ready to put it in our jars. Okay, so I'll give you guys a look here so you can see what it looks like. So you can see all of the powdered pectin and the sugar are dissolved, and the color's changing a little bit. Oh, I see that Brandy, my sister, and my 3 nephews are watching, and they say hi. Hi, guys. Hi, Brandy. Hi, Jackson. Hi, Colin. Hi, Henry. Thanks for watching today. I'll make sure to get you a jar of violet jelly if you like. All right, so we're starting to boil there. I'll bring you back down. And so I'm going to set the timer for a minute. And one thing you want to be careful of is you want to make sure that you use a really big pot for this, because sometimes it can come up pretty high and get really, if you have a bigger stock pot, then that might work too. If it starts to boil a little bit too high, you can turn it down. As long as it stays boiling, you should be fine. And I have a little bit of room there. And so what this is doing right now is it's taking that pectin and the sugar, it's dissolving it, and it's making it a little bit thicker into that jelly, okay? Oh, it's kind of fun to watch. All right, we got about 6, 7 seconds left here to boil. And so we're gonna take that off. We'll turn off our timer here. And you can see that that goes down pretty quickly. Let's take a look at the consistency of our jelly here. You can see it's not really liquid, it's kind of like a syrup, it's a little bit thicker. That looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is bring my camera over to my filling station right here, and we're gonna fill some of our jars. I always like to have a towel here that I can kind of set my hot pan on. And remember that these things are hot, your jars are gonna be hot. So always, always, always be careful when you are doing this. This is a really great fun thing to do with your family, but always make sure that when you're cooking and doing things like this, kids, that you have the help of adults. So what I'm gonna do is use my handy kind of lid lifter or my jar lifter here, and I'm gonna bring 1 jar at a time, and we're gonna fill each one, okay? So I have in my pan here, I'm gonna dump them out because we got some water in there. So my jars are hot and they are sterile. I'm gonna use my funnel, and then I'm going to use my measuring cup, and I'm going to get a little bit of, a little less than a cup here, so it's almost full. And then I'm going to dump it in my jar. All right, so I didn't quite use all of it that time. I'm going to take this out to kind of see how much space you want to leave here in your jar. And you might notice that you're going to have some bubbles. And There's a special tool that you can get that kind of gets rid of the bubbles, but I just kind of use a spoon sometimes. You can kind of mix those up, or you can kind of take them out there. But there's a special canning tool that you can get to get rid of those bubbles. And I'll do that here. And you want to leave about, it's kind of hard to see with this camera, but you want to leave about, a fourth to half of an inch. So you don't want to fill it all the way to the top with your jelly mixture. And then remember that this jar is going to be hot. So I want to carefully put my lid on, but then I'm going to use my mitt here. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you seal it tight or twist it really tight here. And then you want to take your jar lifter and you're going to put it back in the hot bath. And so I'm going to take another one. Take it out. I'm going to use my funnel here. Get a little bit more. And you might notice on the top of your jelly that you're going to get a little film. If you do, then you can just kind of use a spoon to kind of get that off a little bit. A little bit more. There we go. Take my funnel out. I'm going to get some of those bubbles out of there. Put my lid and my ring on here. I'm going to hold the hot jar with my mitts. I'm going to twist it really tight and put this one back into the hot water bath. And then I'm going to grab my next one. Now sometimes when I've done this recipe, you can get 5 jars. Sometimes you can get 6. It just depends on how full you fill them. We'll see how many I can get today. A little bit more. Take those bubbles off. Grab my next ring and my lid. And then I'm going to put this one back in the hot water bath. And grab my next jar. Take those bubbles out. And the bubbles really won't hurt anything if you leave them in there. Some people just like it a little bit to look a little bit more smooth, a little more neat, but they're just fine to leave in too. Twist that nice and tight so it's on there. Put this one back in. And grab our next one. Looks like I'm gonna get, this will probably be my last jar here. And if you happen to have just a little bit left and you don't quite have enough to fill a jar to seal it, You can always fill a jar and not seal it and put it in the refrigerator as long as you refrigerate it, that should work fine. But when we seal these jars, that's what will preserve them. And we'll talk a little bit about that process, what happens with them here in a moment. And get those bubbles off. Put my last lid and ring on here. Oh, let's see, I have another comment. It says, "Hi, Aunt Mary, that must be from one of my little nephews." It says, "I miss you." I miss you too, buddy. Thanks for watching. All right, so I have 5 jars of jelly in there. One of them slipped a little bit, I gotta move it. And 1 jar that is empty, I'm gonna take out here. And we'll just set that aside. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a look on the inside of our pan here. So it might be a little hard on the camera, but I'll kind of take a look. Oh, yep, it says it's me, Jackson. Hi, Jackson. So you can see there's steam coming up from the hot water canning bath, and you might be able to see that there are lots of little tiny bubbles on the jars. And then there's also, it's hard to see, but there's little bubbles coming up from where the lids kind of seal. And that is a process of the canning happening. So what's going on is the heat in the bath here is kind of pressurizing. And so it's pushing the air out. And then the lids, I'm grabbing one of my lids here. The lids actually, on the inside, they have a little bit of wax. You can kind of see that shiny wax on there. And so after it pushes all of the air out, it kind of vacuum seals, it melts in the hot water bath, and that seals and then preserves what's inside that jar. It kind of makes it airtight in there and pushes all that air out before it seals. Now, one thing that, if you haven't done very much canning before, I want to talk a little bit about how you know if a jar is sealed. Oh, I got another comment from Rondi. Hi, Rondi. I haven't seen you, and you love canning. That's wonderful. So, if you've ever made violet jelly before, here's an example for you. I'm going to grab my jars over here and kind of tell you or show you how you know something is sealed. So this is a jar that has not been sealed. A little kind of 8-ounce jelly jar. There's the 3 parts, the jar, there's the lid, and there's the ring here that you kind of twist on. And if a jar is not sealed, this one's empty, but if you push down on the lid, it will make this kind of popping sound, okay? I'm gonna do it one more time so you guys can hear it. Maybe. There we go, it popped. So if you press down after you think you've sealed it and it makes that pop sound, that means it is not sealed, so it's not preserved. You can either keep it in that hot water bath a little bit longer and try to push more of the air out and seal that lid. But, well, you can see it keeps popping. This is a jar of jelly that we've already done. You can see I'm pushing down here on the top of the lid. It's not pushing down, it's not making that little clicking sound. So that means this jar is sealed and good, and it will be preserved, okay? Let's take a look at how our canning's going. Oh, you can see that we have lots of bubbles coming up here from our lids. I'm going to leave this in here a little bit longer. This one, or these ones over here, that have lots of bubbles coming out are the first ones that I put in, and then I kind of worked my way around the jar, so, or the pan. It's a little bit easier for me to remember that if I start in one spot and then move around to the other side. And I know it's hard to see the bubbles, but you see those big air bubbles that are coming up? That means that this is pushing the air out, and then it's going to seal those jars, okay? All right. So one thing that I will do for this recipe is after we're done with our Facebook Live here, I'm going to post a link to this recipe. So if you're interested in trying this recipe, you can. But you can also do a search online. There's lots of different places that you can find wonderful alternatives. Like I said, if you don't like to use a whole ton of sugar, or if you want to use an alternative to sugar, like a sugar substitute, then you can use that as well. So, all right. I still have, I'm gonna test one of my jars that I started off with and see if that lid clicks. And so I'm gonna use my lid lifter, have my pot holder ready, because I don't wanna touch that lid. Drain a little bit of that off. Yep, so it feels like it is sealed. This one didn't have any air bubbles coming out of it anymore. That lid is not clicking, so that means that this one is done. Taking a look at my next one. That one might be ready too. Okay. Yep, that one is sealed, vacuum sealed down. Let's try our next one. That one's good. Yep, that one is sealed. Try this last one here. Yep, that one is sealed as well. All right, so I'm gonna turn off my hot water because I won't need that anymore. And we're gonna take a look at our jars here. So what you want to do is make sure you leave your jars sitting on the counter. Some people say from half a day to a whole day. So if you have a place where you can just leave them, that's probably the best thing. So I'm just going to leave these kind of set here on the counter. And we're going to kind of go back over here to take a look at our violets. So again, if you're unfamiliar with the violets, there, that beautiful purple flower is what we use today. And we'll take one more look at our finished product that I have, that color of that beautiful violet jelly. Kind of a medium purple in color there. So, I would like to thank everyone kind of for tuning in today. The first of our online wild edible series. If you have any requests or ideas that you would like us to try, we have a few things that we're wanting to try this spring and summer of wild edibles, things you could find out in your own yard. Then put those in the comments or send us a message. We'd be happy to try some different things. Also, if you have any requests or ideas for other types of Facebook Live education, things you want to learn about, please send us those requests. We'd be happy to do those. Thank you very much for tuning in today. And I do want to say the making the violet jelly, making wild edibles is a great kind of family activity. And the thing that's the most time consuming is picking all of those violet blossoms. So great kind of fun, family fun activity. One thing that I forgot to say right at the beginning. So if you're using wild edibles, especially if you're getting them from residential yards, you want to make sure that 100% that they do not use any kind of pesticides on their yards, because of course you're going to be eating those things, and you want to make sure that you don't get any of those chemicals and toxic things inside your body. So make sure that you know 100% that you don't use lawn pesticides, or wherever you're getting them from does not as well. So very, very important. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.